Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk Podcast, joined by Phil Perry. What do we got for you today? We got OTA first impressions. We had our first introduction to the 2021 Patriots as we had a chance on Thursday to watch a workout. Also, Adam Vinatieri has retired. Does Bill Belichick want him in the Hall of Fame? You bet your sweet pippy he does. Why? Well, there might be more to it than just making Adam feel good. All that and more on today's Tom Curran's Patriots Talk Podcast.
Adam Vinatieri moves the 40. Patriots time. World champion. And there ain't nothing you can do about
it. It's good to have the opportunity to, work with all the players, whether it be young players or new players or guys that are coming back in their second, third year, or in some cases, well beyond that. To work with them face to face, to be on the field, to interact with them, and to see them improve and to try to improve, and to take the coaching and the instructions they're getting and turn those into better plays and better reps the next day or the next opportunity they get to do that. So that's what you want to see this time of year is the improvement of each player individually, and then collectively to start to put a team together out there so that we can call plays and run plays and everybody know what to do, and then refine the techniques and reads and adjustments and so forth as we go. And that's the phase in the process we're in, and it's it's obviously great to be a part of it, and we're making a lot of progress daily. Of course, we have a long way to go, but we're chipping away at it.
All right, Phil, it's time to give the people what they want. We're going to talk quarterbacks. We're going to talk heavy on the quarterbacks right now from this first OTA. Before we get to the individuals, just lay out what people in the media were seeing today from the team. How was the attendance, et cetera?
The attendance was not sparse, Tom, but they were lacking almost 30 guys by my count. Based on what we saw early in practice, you had a couple of stragglers late, Damian Harris, Dalton Keene, guys like that were not full participants, but were there. So no Devin McCourty, no Dante Hightower, no James White, no Lawrence Guy. Some pretty big names, Tom, not involved today, but we did see 4 quarterbacks, and we saw them get plenty of work in drills, and then one lowly 7-on-7 period.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting. Obviously, just to, again, set the stage, no pads, no contact. This is, as Bill Belichick stresses frequently, not an evaluation. It's a teaching camp, and these will all be like that, including the mini camp that we'll have in mid-June. Let's get into the new guy right away, Mac Jones. What jumped out to me, Phil, was, and I don't know what I was expecting, but when we get out there and the red jersey number 50 has inside of it a guy who I just thought was a little narrower at the top than I expected, and seemingly like a half head shorter than Jarrett Stidham, and they're measured out at the same. So I'm not sure if Stidham had a double extra fat helmet and lifts on his cleats, but those two things stood out to me about Mac Jones. A little more slight than I anticipated, as opposed to the barrel-chested Beefcake Jimmy, who was shorter than Mac, and just a little bit shorter than I anticipated, Phil.
He definitely, and listen, I am the worst of the worst when it comes to gauging anything in terms of heights and weights on the field. He's obviously much smaller than Cam Newton. And so that's what really stands out to me is when those two guys are next to each other, throwing at the same time, which we often saw. They actually were the two who were paired together when the 4 quarterbacks broke up 2 by 2 to work drills together and things like that. You saw them both standing next to each other quite a bit. And the difference in size is obvious. To me, I didn't notice as much of a difference between Jones and Stidham, but Tom, it came down to, for me, just the ability to throw the football accurately. No doubt. And when we look at that, that's where Mac Jones stood out 100%. To me. I thought he was pretty accurate today.
And what I want to allude to too here is the things that I'm citing with Mac Jones are things that he can improve, because we're going to get into the throwing, but he's going to fill out. You take a guy like Gunnar Olszewski, looked like he could have been getting off a school bus 2 years ago. Now he is a gunner in full. Big thighs. He looks terrific. Same thing happened with Edelman. Same thing will happen with Mac Jones, but there is going to be work to be done body-wise for him. And that's something Mike Lombardi pointed out as well. But Phil, we both agreed and both tweeted out Mac Jones as advertised, certainly in terms of accuracy, and it stood out.
It did stand out to me. I mean, talking about just putting the football on guys' faces consistently. And sounds pretty easy. It sounds simple. You know, when you're talking about a lot of the 5-yard throws that they're making where tight end is either sitting over the middle of the field or he's breaking out away from a defender, but he puts it right on the guy's face and he leads the guy by a half a step if he's headed in a certain direction, if he's on the move. Thought he threw the anticipation today, maybe better than any of the other 3 quarterbacks. Yeah, I mean, up the seam, they're working a bunch of throws up the seam today throughout the course of the practice. And Matt Lacoste had one football catch him, Tom, because as soon as he whipped his head around, it was on him and it was right in front of him. And he had, as you said earlier today when we were talking off air, he had no choice but to catch it. So those are the kinds of things that Mac Jones is going to have to do, because we know, as Jacoby Myers said the other day, he's not running by anybody anytime soon, and he does not have the biggest arm. But if he can throw on time and accurately, that's going to go a long way.
What I also was noticeable was how fun McDaniels was trying to make it. And again, we got to really emphasize that this is a halfway fun recreational while learning too. They've been here for 3 days. We talked about the sparse attendance. Some guys probably were here early in the week and weren't now, but this had not a last day of school feel to it, but they did some different throwing competitions, throwing into the garbage can, which we've seen. None of them hit it. Thank God Hunter Henry came over and tried to take a spare throw at the end. Thank God he didn't put it in either. But Phil, some of those throwing games and contests they were having were actually worth learning from as well. Your impressions off of the get rid of it quick ones?
Yeah, fun little game where McDaniels would say hut, and you had to go from receiving a quote unquote snap to putting it in the hands of your target about 15 yards away or so. And whoever's target caught it first won, essentially. Brian Hoyer surprisingly beat Mac Jones twice. Cam Newton beat Jarrett Stidham. And then at the end, sort of the final there, it looked like Cam and Hoyer tied. But again, a fun way to work on something like getting the football out of your hands quickly.
I felt like Hoyer beat Jones on the second one.
He definitely beat him twice. Hoyer beat Jones twice. No doubt about it.
I thought Jones beat Hoyer on the second one, and they stuffed the ballot box for him.
Oh, maybe.
And on the Cam one, it was interesting. But here's the thing. And Cam got it out quicker than Stidham, surprisingly, and that's probably because he throws it from his shoulder as opposed to up here. Stidham's coming over the top. But what did you think of the velocity on Mac Jones's throws? Because I think that's going to be something that is going to have to be burnished and improved as well. You don't see, some of these quarterbacks around the league, virtually all quarterbacks around the league, can throw a ball that probably whistles. Doesn't seem to be a live arm. Again, that is as advertised.
Yeah, right. We're not expecting them to have a huge arm. Today was not really a day other than those bucket throws, Tom. I mean, they really didn't open it up at all. I was waiting to see Cam Newton try to put a little extra on some of these passes, but there just weren't that many opportunities, it felt like, today for guys to make those kinds of throws. So I'm not expecting Mac Jones to wow us with any kind of electricity coming from his right arm, but I'm really not expecting that from any of these guys. Stidham probably is the best arm of any of them.
No doubt. I mean, I am. I mean, those guys are running down the seam. Throw it with some pop. I mean, Stidham does.
But that's just not what their games are. I mean, that's not Cam anymore. It's not Mac Jones. It's not Brian Hoyer. Like that. That's just, nobody's going to be Josh Allen out there.
Right. And this is the caveat before we get into Cam that I would say is, as we watch this goulash of quarterbacks, Phil, and we try and figure out who's going to have the edge and which one gives them the best chance to win, it only amplifies for me, and I'm only going to spend a second with this bone, that you had a quarterback who undeniably had a better arm than all of them here, who just won a Super Bowl 10 months ago, and the team didn't want him around. So now they're pounding their head against the wall to try and find a suitable quarterback when one of the best 5 quarterbacks still in the league was here and wanted to stay. Just an observation, just a guy out here talking, but it's a little bit insane in my estimation when we think about it. Fair,
but I'm just happy that you're able to get this out of your system now.
But we're watching this, like, why? Maybe if you look at it this way, it's like trying to make sense out of, moving into a house that is just not what you were hoping for and trying to justify it. And then you say, but we had that other house. Why did we move out of it?
But aren't you looking at this and as a football fan?
Oh, it's fun.
Who enjoys observing the game.
100% it's fun.
But Tom, compared to just last year, so much better than just last year training camp when it's Cam Newton fresh to the offense, Jarrett Stidham with no offseason, and Brian Hoyer. Like, at least there's a guy who is there. And yes, Mac Jones's arm isn't great, but he is consistently accurate in his first practice. I mean, we're used to seeing rookie quarterbacks, Tom, even Jimmy Garoppolo in 7-on-7 periods, hold, throw it away, or throw it to the check down, or start scrambling around if you're Tim Tebow. Like, you didn't even really see that from Mac Jones. I'm sure we will see it.
7 in an OTA.
I'm sure we'll see it. But this guy is better than the other young quarterbacks that they brought in. He should be, at least. And so when we see things that look promising, it's okay to point those out.
No, I'm fine to look at that and see the upside, but it's just worth noting too that we are here doing that for one specific reason that is still a little bit head scratching in my estimation. And it's, again, this is non-competitive. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo in year 1 and year 2 not know whether to poop or go blind in some red zone drills. He would have horrendous practices. There are going to be horrendous Mac Jones practices that we are going to not pin the gas pedal on, just as there will be some horrendous Cam Newton practices, which brings us to Cam right now, Cameron Jarrell. Throwing against air, you almost want to be putting it on faces, and the faces were not having it put on them, were they, Phil?
Just not as consistently as some other guys. And I don't think he's ever, Tom, going to be an incredibly accurate thrower of the football. To me, I was trying to discern mechanical changes, but I'm not a quarterback's coach. I'm not a kinesthesiologist. So it's hard for me to say anything other than
he lapses.
He looks the same as he did last year.
He lapses into the stuff that doesn't work sometimes.
And so we saw him early in the practice working on not tilting his shoulders as he's about to release. We saw him miss high on occasion. We saw him miss low on occasion. He's a little more scattershot. That's always who he's been. It's always who he will be. The question for Bill Belichick is how much of that is he going to be willing to put up with?
Yeah. And is that acceptable for this offense? It's not, it is always who he's been and who he's going to be. But when you have Hunter Henry and not Matthew Judon, but Jonnu Smith and the guys that you have now populated your offense with, is it acceptable if against air, a seam route to a wide receiver means he has to lay out or go scurrying way off the numbers to go make the catch? Because it's not going to be caught. That's not going to be caught in the game. It's going to get that guy demolished, or it's going to eliminate that pass from your repertoire if you can't execute it. Again, doesn't mean Cam will never be able to execute it, but he's not getting any more accurate. We did not see him painting the corners. Here, however, is Bill Belichick on Cam Newton from earlier on Thursday with another salute to Cam.
With Cam Newton, just curious your thoughts on how he's approached this offseason, and how do you think he's going to handle the challenge of having a first-round quarterback behind him?
Cam's been here, all the way through. He was here, at the beginning, and has been a consistent participant. Continues to give us the usual, leadership and energy that he brings to the field and to the workouts and to practice. So, Cam's very professional, and I'm sure that he'll, continue to work hard to do his best out there like he's always done for us. It's never been anything but that from the day he got here.
All right, let's put a bow on Cam and move over to Stidrock. Continually, he keeps on throwing it hard and accurately. It's just a shame that whatever goes on up here in these 6 inches between the ears is not working, because he can really throw a good ball, Phil.
He throws a good ball. It looks nice coming off his hand. I thought when they did that bucket drill, like the two best balls when you're just watching them fly through the air 30, 35 yards down the field were Stidham's and Mac Jones's. I mean, they're both tight spirals. The nose comes down the way it's supposed to. Cam Newton kind of predictably, I would say, had a couple of wobblers. The thing with Stidham, I think still, Tom, and it stood out a little bit to me today. Again, it's just one practice, but it did stand out a little bit to me today that I noticed Mac Jones throwing early with anticipation.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few with Stidham every so often where it's the guy is waiting at the top of his route, coming back to the football on the deep comeback, an extra beat, and then
So
the ball
important.
comes out.
See,
And so that's I think
gonna-
part of the issue with them.
And that's something that you should, as Patriots fans, when we know you're going to be there at camp, which will be open by and large, as we understand, watch for that, because that's more important than how well he fills out his uniform. That's more important than his next size. Are you throwing it with anticipation to the spot that the guy's going? That was a bug coming by, to the spot where the guy is heading, so it intersects correctly with enough velocity so it doesn't get taken the other way. And you're right, that is a Stidham fault. There are plays where he pulls it off, absolutely textbook. There's plays that we saw last year where he hangs in there and takes the thrashing. And then there's plays where, again, poop or go blind and throw it backwards and should have been a gosh darn turnover. The only thing I'll say about Hoyer, he had the best catch of the day made on one of his throws, one of the few downfield throws, excellent throw to Nelson Aguilar. And all I'm thinking is, why is he taking reps? Why? Here's Bill on splitting up the reps between 4 different guys.
So even though they're not in there taking it, mentally, they can still take it and still, go through the process. In the quarterback's case, his pre-snap keys and real-time timing rather than watching it on film and that kind of thing. But, real-time timing of, all right, here's what happens when the ball's snapped. Here's what I see. Here's where I go with the ball. But again, that's true of every position. So that's what a good player will do. That's what a good professional will do. They'll take advantage of every rep, whether they're in there or not, and then take advantage of the ones that they are in there on the field for. And so that's, we emphasize that with all players, and the plays that they get, and the team needs depth, and you never know what's going to happen at any position, and you can go from very quickly to having too many to not having enough. And so at this point in time, I feel like all those players are good players, and Brian has the most experience, and Cam had a lot of experience from last year, and Jared's had some off and on opportunities, but he'll continue to get opportunities, and so will Max. So we'll just see how it goes.
So it was after that catch by Aguilar, I look at our guy Mike Reese and I say, great catch, but why is he throwing? And Mike goes, maybe it's in case Mac beats him out and our guy Cam decides he doesn't want to stick around. Then he's the backup. Not a horrible theory. Mike's right over there. He gave it okay to appropriate that take from you. Double thumbs up.
He's always got good theories, that guy. And listen, I understand wanting to get them all work, but Tom, you're right. I mean, especially with Stidham and Mac Jones. So the way that the 7-on-7 drill went today was the only competitive drill they had. Cam Newton got 4 reps. Mac Jones was next up. He got 3. Jarrett Stidham was up after that. He also got 3. Brian Hoyer got 2. Like, could you spread Hoyer's reps and give Mac Jones 1 extra rep, give Jarrett Stidham 1 extra rep, especially when there are so few of those competitive reps and there's only time for so many of those in a given practice. And I think with both those guys, like Mac Jones's best throw in 7-on-7s was his 3rd throw. He had a nice little shoulder pump fake, ripped a throw over the middle, not a deep ball, but probably 15 yards over the middle. It hit Christian Wilkerson's hands and it was a drop, but probably his best throw of the day, period. Wouldn't you like to see him get a chance to make another? That's not necessarily a check down to Tyler Gaffney, which were his 2 first throws in 7-on-7. Like, I think there's value in that there's not necessarily the same type of value if you're giving those throws to Brian Hoyer.
And we might just be backseat driving to a driver, Bill Belichick, who knows exactly where the car is going, and we don't have to tell him that these reps have to be distributed differently. I bet you he gets it. I bet you he understands that, but it is worth observing that this is what's going on here in May at the one time we got out there and saw the opportunity to judge anything. Move away from the quarterbacks for a second, and receivers, again, we're not seeing full contact, really shouldn't be any contact at all. And a lot of the stars from the defense weren't there. So I'm going to stick with skill positions, and I'm going to make an observation about N'Keal Harry, and that is that he is a lumbering football player. He's just not a smooth mover. And it's just not getting better. Phil, what did you see? Because Phil and I was down with Reese. What did you see?
Yeah, I just was trying to think back, and this is teaching camp. It's also known as passing camp. I think that's how we spoke of this, for years, these spring workouts. It's passing camp. And when you can point to a Nelson Aguilar catch deep down the field, and maybe a couple of catches on air, Kendrick Bourne had a nice one up the seam, Jacoby Myers had a nice one up the seam. But when the receivers don't really show you anything in almost a full practice outside of one deep throw to the guy who should be your number one, Nelson Aguilar, it feels like a little bit of a concern to me. And N'Keal Harry, I mean, really, Tom, I just didn't notice him at all. And so, we talk a lot about Julio Jones and how much he could potentially help this offense. Like, that's who N'Keal Harry is supposed to be. First round, big bodied, wide receiver on the outside. There should be a play a day when we're out there at practice where we say, wow, that guy's an athlete. Wow, there's not many people who could do that. And you just don't see it with him.
Yeah, and it's those against air routes where they're running like in cuts at 12 yards. There's nothing there except for them to explode off the line, put their left foot in the ground if they're breaking in, and get there. And it's just the first three steps when you compare them to an Aguilar or a Bourne or even a Hunter Henry, who's similar sized. It's just plotting. It's not an electric first round pick level speed. All that said, Phil, I'm going to veer for a quick second and talk about Julio Jones, who we have continued reports as we wait to find out what happens with him on June 1st and whether he does get dealt and whether the Patriots are in on it. There are players on the Patriots roster who, if they did want to get a dynamic wide receiver, and Jones would certainly fit that bill, who the Patriots could send out of town to the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think Atlanta's going to look at N'Keal Harry any differently than we do. They're probably a little bit more adept at this. No guarantee. That's why these GMs turn over all the time. But would you consider a player in exchange with a pick for Julio Jones, a Stidham, a Chase Winovich? I mean, you go Chase Winovich in a fourth. Why not?
I think the Atlanta Falcons would say, well, it's not enough. That's why not. But I do like that idea of,
I think that's enough.
having an extra piece to go with it. It might end up being enough at the end of the day, Tom, because the Falcons it just feels like have no leverage now that Julio Jones has gone on national television and say, I'm out of there. And everybody knows that they have to get rid of this guy based on their salary cap situation. So I think the price is going to be less than we think for him. I don't hate the idea, but I think you are a little bit limited in terms of the kind of player you can send back. Right, we've talked about Stephon Gilmore potentially being in a trade for the Patriots now for 6 months, it feels like. I don't think the Falcons, as good a player as Gilmore still is, would be interested, because the whole point of getting rid of Julio Jones is you're trying to cut costs. You're trying to cut salary. Right. So,
but that's why Winovich would be a great
Winovich, Stidham, any of these recent draft picks from the last 2 or 3 years, you pair that guy with a third. I think they're going to end up, Tom, getting the equivalent of a second round pick. Does that mean it's a future first? Does it mean it's a third in a player? I think that's probably the range of value that you're talking. And maybe it's more than that, depending on how much money the Falcons are willing to eat. We have seen football teams, this is rare in football, but we have seen football teams do this recently. The Panthers just did it with Teddy Bridgewater in order to make trades more palatable for the other side. So maybe that's in play too.
Good deal. All right. We will be back, obviously, for OTAs next week, the week after, and then we will have the mini camp, which will be padded, and that will be mandatory. So we will be taking attendance in earnest at that point. Phil, before I switch to a quick Adam Vinatieri conversation, is the attendance at these OTAs something to monitor or something to be alarmed about? Because this is the foundation laying portion of the Patriots program, and they have more guys who haven't seen this foundation than ever.
Right. And we've been told for many years how important it is when it comes to laying that foundation. I mean, Gerard Mayo, we used to sit in a room and talk to him about the importance of OTAs. And this is where everything gets started. And, when Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski were deciding that they didn't want to go, that was an issue for somebody like Mayo. So I just find it interesting, Tom. I don't know if it's surprising, because we did get a statement from Patriots players earlier this offseason saying, hey, many of us are not going to be at the voluntary portion of OTAs. And so I think you're just seeing players exercise that. And there have been players across the league that have been very vocal about doing that same thing. Tom Brady, chief among them, right? So, I think Bill Belichick's answer this morning about players not being at OTAs was interesting because it felt very accepting the way he shared the message with us. I don't know how it's going behind closed doors at One Patriot Place, but I don't know. Is this another example of chill Bill? He's okay with the veterans, the McCourties, the Gilmores of the world not showing up to practice in the spring?
It is worth noting, though, that teams like the Los Angeles Chargers have like 83 of 90 players. Now, we don't know what exactly was going on Tuesday and Wednesday in terms of attendance. Phil pointed out J.C. Jackson was a player who was not present on Thursday, but who was present earlier in the week. We don't know how many of those there were, but it was a significant number that were not. So is there solidarity among veterans staying away? Was it just happenstance? It's Thursday before Memorial Day weekend, and it's okay to take some time off in May because, as Belichick alluded to, families, life happens, and guys will and should allow that to intervene. But worth watching as we go forward. Also worth watching 5 years hence. Well, not from right now, but right around the Super Bowl in 5 years, will be the disposition of the Hall of Fame voters towards one Adam Vinatieri. Here's how Bill Belichick feels about the recently retired Patriots and Colts superstar kicker.
A couple quick comments on Adam. Was very fortunate as a head coach to have some outstanding kickers from Stover to Adam to Steve, and Nick most recently. But Adam's really, in my mind, the best of all time. His consistency, his ability to handle clutch situations, and make the biggest kicks, and just the longevity of his career. I mean, almost a quarter of a century, and the consistency is just remarkable. It was such a pleasure to be with Adam, even from his rookie year in '96. To then when I came back, and he was obviously right in the prime of his career, and made so many big kicks. We were in so many close games during the time that I was when he was here and I was the head coach. We were in so many close games that his ability to consistently put points on the board was incredibly valuable. And obviously the first kick in the Snow Bowl to tie it was has to go down as one of the great kicks of all time, if not the greatest. And then 2 game-winning kicks in Super Bowls just doesn't get any bigger than that. But one thing with Adam, you never felt that. You never felt the pressure of the moment, and he certainly didn't seem to. So it gave me and our team, great confidence. And again, I was very, very fortunate to have a player of his caliber. In my time as a head coach, and then, as I said, before and after, we'd had some pretty good ones too. But Adam was really, really special. So tribute to him and his great career, and I'm sure we'll place him in the Hall of Fame in 5 years. That's where he should be.
All right, Phil. No argument, I think, if you're a sane football watcher who's not trying to will actually your way into the sunset, you're going to say, yeah, of course he's a Hall of Famer. He has one of the most famous kicks in football history. He played for 37 years. Morton Anderson and Jan Stenerud are in. Why would you not have Vinatieri? So he's going to get in. But Bill Belichick is not only the greatest coach in NFL history, he is also currently its greatest historian, or at least its most visible. And he understands what his voice means when he puts on that historian hat or lab coat and explains that Adam Vinatieri needs to be in the Hall of Fame ASAFP. Do you think that the Patriots have a right to feel jobbed if they don't end up with 11 Hall of Famers like the 70s Steelers, or 9 like the Cowboys of the 70s, or I think it was 12 with the Packers, 12 with the Packers of the 60s, or 9 with the Niners?
I don't think they necessarily have to fill jobs, but I do think there needs to be significant representation, right? I think part of the reason, Bill Belichick is probably as proud as he is of the job he's done as a team builder is because he would say, well, we had great depth, right? Across all of those Super Bowl winning teams, we had depth, which means that you probably don't have the number of quote unquote star caliber players that maybe other dynasties have had. But Tom, I mean, we could go through the list of obvious Hall of Fame candidates right now, and there's not that many. So I understand the push for Vinatieri. It's Brady, it's Gronkowski, Ty Law's already in. Vinatieri is the next most obvious, and you can make cases. Richard Seymour should be in.
Let me just hit these. These are
Go ahead.
definites. Kraft and Belichick are definites. So that's Ty, Gronk, Brady, Belichick, Vinatieri, Kraft. Seymour may stay on the edge for a little while. Vince Wilfork should be a Hall of Fame player. He was one of the 10 best players in the NFL for a period of time. He was an All-Pro. He was a Pro Bowler, and he was a great leader on this franchise. He is, in my mind, the same way that Joe Green should be regarded. Joe Green was a friggin' legend. All right, give me Jack Ham or somebody with the Steelers. 11 Steelers, come on. After Wilfork, it's Mankins. No Super Bowls. Wes Welker, no Super Bowls, both all-pro level players. Then you get to a guy who had Super Bowls, but wasn't an all-pro. It's Edelman. Then you have a guy who compiled some ridiculous statistics, was a great leader in Rodney Harrison, but he had that strike against him of people looking at him and saying he was a dirty player. So he wasn't a Pro Bowler and an all-pro. And then to me, Phil, it'll be fascinating because Stephon Gilmore was a Defensive Player of the Year. So when we get to that point, those are the most likely, the only ones I can really come up with who are going to be pushing for it.
I mean, Revis is going to get in, but no one's going to consider him a Patriot first.
Yeah,
he'll
wear a Jets hat. If they wore hats.
yeah. If they wore hats, if the bust had a hat, it probably would be Jets for him. But I get it. I mean, like it feels like there should be, when you have 6 Super Bowl titles in a period that spans 20 years, you should have more than 4 players in the Hall of Fame. 6 sounds like a nice number, but when one is the owner and one is the coach, it feels like the talent representation isn't enough. So yeah. I think Seymour should be in. I think Rodney Harrison should be in. That for some reason, Tom, maybe it's because of Belichick and Brady. The other players on those rosters just don't get the credit.
Yeah, they are kind of the sun which eclipses or the moon. I don't know. Their excellence and how often they're cited, whether it's Brady leading to Bill or Bill leading to Brady, the conversation really never reaches the running game. There's no Franco Harris here. There is no Jerry Rice, except for Gronk, but there was no Jerry Rice of the first iteration. I don't think Dwight Clark was a Hall of Famer. Be that as it may, I'm going too far afield, but I do think that the system, the Belichick genius, and the Brady excellence do sometimes eclipse. Like Edelman is looked at as a system receiver, as will Welker be. And if Welker won a Super Bowl and caught that pass, I still don't know if it would have changed his conversation. It would have been, who wouldn't catch 130 passes from Tom Brady if you're in your prime?
Unfortunately for these players, Tom, though, we know things like Pro Bowls matter, all pros matter. And so when you get into that room and you start discussing these guys, could talk till you're blue in the face about Julian Edelman, or even, Dante Hightower, who, is not going to be a Hall of Fame player, but is hugely important to the history of this franchise and the fact that they've won 3 since 2014. And it's not going to matter because if you don't have those Pro Football Reference stats, if you don't have those little markings that say you were a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro next to your name, you're probably not going to get in.
Yeah. So I just did find it interesting. And I think that Bill would do that with any player who's deserving, ask for that salute. Or say this is one of the greatest players in NFL history. So I'm not saying that it's out of the ordinary for him to mention the Hall of Fame, but he did seem to stress how important it was for him. And it should be important for Bill Belichick that this team gets its due. Look, Robert Kraft should be in by now. And I've said this before. And as a person who's from the area, and has no great affinity for ownership one way or the other generally, but just objectively looking at it, the amount that he did to keep the team here, to not have the state pay through the nose to keep it, to provide what they did, and to continue to provide to the community, that he's on the outside looking in, pushing 80 years old. Look, bottom line is this. I saw Pat Bowen inducted posthumously a couple of years ago, and I was like, well, wait, come on. He was a Hall of Famer previously. He's a Hall of Famer now. What's the difference? Put him in. So that's my 2 cents on that whole operation. But Phil,
Well said.
We got a lot to plow through over the next couple of weeks, and then it's only mini camp time. But I hope you enjoyed it, folks. Hope we gave you some insights. Phil, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye.